It is really crazy how my entire career was built off of me sharing and overcoming so many things. I think if you don't even know the story, just going from an adoptee to, my parents divorced, my mom got diagnosed with cancer around 9. That's also when bullying started happening. It's when I first self-harmed for the first time. And the bullying continued, like cyber, physical, mental, verbal. And then 11, I attempted suicide and then started self-harming more, eating disorders, doing all of that until I was 15, 16 when I stopped, like right around that time. And then my birthday that I share with my adoptive mom happened, and then 2 weeks later she passed away. And then 2 years later, when I was 18, 3 months after graduating high school, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee alone, not knowing anyone, went into the country music industry as the first Asian country singer, female Asian country singer, signed 19 to arts development and management, and then everything I experienced in there, I think it's perfectly clear why I am the way I am and why I am naturally able to handle tough things and figuring out how to overcome, and it's kind of just part of my DNA and life process. But with all of that being said so easily, it's really interesting for myself to see how hard it is to talk about my miscarriage. This video is going to give you a lot of insight, I think, not only on my mindset, but also about my awareness and my consciousness that I grew from a very, very young age. And something I became aware about by multiple psychics was that my adoptive mom, the one who passed away, who has the same birthday as me, she and I reincarnate into parent and child every life. I heard that from 4 different psychics, and I very much believe it. And I think when I lost her traumatically, I never wanted kids, but I also kind of felt like it wasn't my destiny in this life to have a child in a sense of, my own child. I did believe that, I was meant to have children kind of throughout the world with my destiny and my career and my job that I wanted to do on making other people's lives better and nurturing and loving that way to just everyone, and how that would be able to fulfill, children for me. And I think I played with the ideas in my early 20s with people, if my life was, able to have a caring father or someone who was able to give a lot of stuff that I really believed I couldn't. I had that idea. And then when Guillaume and I started dating, we were friends for so long before we started dating and talked about children, because he has a daughter with his ex-wife. And I remember I told him that I loved that about him. I love that he got to experience not only being married but having a child, because I wasn't sure if I would be able to fulfill that for him. So I wanted him to have that experience, and I was really grateful that he did. Early 2025, I wasn't really fully aware of my timeline, I guess, in a sense, and I was kind of experimenting multiple things at the time. I was moving into an entirely different career path, and desire to kind of wanting to move forward from having to be in such a dark place on constantly talking about my past and my mental health and things that I talked about every single day for over a decade, that I felt like I wanted to have people see me for who I am today versus who I was in the past. And that kind of opened my heart to welcome, the potential of children. And here in Vietnam, you see women and femininity just so powerful, and how many working moms, even single moms, married moms, just how powerful it is to have children, and how different the culture of having children is in Vietnam than to what I saw in the States. Yeah, I had a lot of reserves of having children, in the States. There was a lot of things in my childhood that I really appreciate to this day, including growing up in Oregon, growing up with no technology, still having to go climb every tree to get fulfillment and being outdoors, having activities, not having the social media, not being, unsafe at schools. Environment, I think, has changed so much. But at the same time, I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom. I want to work. I want to be always fulfilling my selfish desires. And, I tend to be really selfless in my job, and that tends to make me very selfish in my personal life. And I wasn't able to really be aware on how to balance that with a child. But when I started really getting serious with Guillaume, it definitely was more of a possibility and more of a desire, seeing how he is with his daughter, seeing how he is with me, and that type of love that added so much more than what I felt whole of already. And for me to feel whole, I really didn't need children and that type of stuff. So he added more to what already made me whole. Which is why we say individually we're whole, together we're more, So January and February of 2025, we actually actively and intentionally welcomed having a baby. My mom died when I was 2 weeks fresh 16, so she never saw me date. She never was able to fully explain children. We saw her and my father struggle and children, obviously, because they adopted my older sister and I, because they couldn't have kids. And then 5 years later, after they adopted me, they had my younger sister. And so I recognize the trouble of fertility and stuff like that, but I never fully understood it because I never actually got to have those conversations with her. I really didn't understand why we couldn't have a kid. I thought, having unprotected sex with the intention of, wanting a baby is what made the sperm and the egg kind of come together. And, I was aware of a lot of spiritual aspects on not being ready, timing and stuff like that, but I guess the physical human aspect of it was really confusing to me. After a few months of trying, we couldn't conceive, and I got the opportunity for the potential TV show on Amy Finds Her Roots. I was starting to get more busy in my career again, and I recognized that maybe this was the universe telling me that I'm not supposed to have a baby. And I kind of felt it as by trying to conceive, we were asking the universe if we were meant to have a baby, and our answer was no. TMI, but unprotected sex was the way it was. And naively, we thought because we couldn't conceive that the universe would just block every opportunity for a baby to come. And that might sound crazy, but that is kind of how we lived and how we believe in our trust within our spirituality and everything. So that was kind of it. The crazy thing, that time we did use a condom, that was when we actually conceived. I'm not going to go into detail, but I don't really understand it, but that's just how it happened. I have a very, I won't say great relationship with my body. You know, it's still an ongoing healing process after all of my eating disorders and body dysmorphia. But I'm very aware of the senses and the feelings and my chakras and everything involved within my body. I'm very aware. So I knew pretty quickly that I was pregnant, and Guillaume saw it. I just woke up one day and I just craved this specific curry, not Vietnamese curry, but like katsu Japanese curry, which is something I don't really crave. And we kind of knew. I remember asked me why I wanted it so bad, and I answered, I don't know. And we looked at each other, and he was like, I think you're pregnant. And I'm like, oh my God, you know? And it was kind of that shock, because we genuinely believed the universe told us no. And I think that was the hardest part in all of this, was we already accepted a no, and this felt like an unfair, unnecessary experience to validate the universe saying no by having a miscarriage. So my miscarriage was very early, and I think that's something no one really talks about, because I think a lot of stories are, you know, so much later and further into the process, which I have no desire to say I know what that's like or experience or compare my story. But it is amazingly tragic how even within the first few months, how devastating and heartbreaking that feeling and emotions and confusion is. We were about to take a pregnancy test because it was way past the time we could, but we were ready to like tell our parents. The night before we were going to tell people, I was in a lot of pain, laying on the bed crying, and just was bleeding in a way that was not normal, not anything that I felt before in my life. And they tend to have very painful menstrual cycles. It just was different in every way, and I was just crying and bleeding because I think deep down I knew, but I remember telling Guillaume that I was crying because I thought we were pregnant, but it turns out to just be my period. And that's really sad to me, because I really thought I was pregnant. I was ready to be pregnant, and I'm sad because it's my period. And he looked at me and he started like tearing up, but stayed very, very strong. And I remember he just grabbed my face, and he was the one who said, "Baby, it's not your period, it's a miscarriage." Heard him, and it shocked me, to be honest, how much I tried to defend the reality to stay safe in my fantasy on wanting to believe so bad that we were just never pregnant, rather than deal with the fact that I had a miscarriage. And I fought him pretty hard on not wanting to believe it and not wanting to have to go through something like that, and trying to save myself from any further trauma in my life. especially a trauma that is birthed from nothing but love. I think I was so used to just so much hate, and being able to handle hate, being able to handle any trauma that is associated with hate. But the only time of trauma based off of pure love that is still one of the hardest things to heal was my mom's death. And knowing that pain and that heartbreak, I was doing everything I could to save myself from ever experiencing something like that again. I was devastated and confused. And I said I was very aware of it when it was happening, and I was just saying, like, I thought we weren't, like, I knew it. I knew we weren't supposed to have a baby. Like, why? You know, like, why did I let myself go against what I thought I already knew, kind of stuff. And it was really a really tough night. And unfortunately, I had a work obligation 2 days later to sing and be a part of a Vietnam American diplomatic conference. So it was a tough time. I look at pictures and I looked as strong as I can be, which I always am able to do. It's one of my greatest, worst talents. I had that initial breakdown. Subconsciously, selfishly, I held on to the hope that I would bleed for a week and call it my period. And when it stopped a few days later, I had my second hit. The emotions that I had when my mom passed away, I hyperventilated for the first time as an adult since my mom passed away, where you're just like breathing so heavily from anxiety and from stress. I experienced a lot of emotional grieving ways that I did when my mom passed away. So revisiting those experiences was triggering, and you kind of act like a 15-year-old girl again who's just not able to fully comprehend and handle the emotions. It's really hard for me, and I can't explain why it was hard, other than the fact that I didn't want to have to go through the growth and the process and the transformation and the journey of going through this. I just felt so tired, and I felt like I was protecting myself so much. And that's something that I think is a constant thing in my personal life, is I tend to be a preventer. I tend to see all directions and ways things can go and prevent them ever happening, because I'm just so tired after overcoming my entire life in a third of my life. And that's a very selfish thing that I do. Just something I think this whole experience has helped me, is realizing how strong I was, but how much stronger I am because of everything. And that, you know, I choose to continue not only being alive, but to live. And when you live, life just tends to happen. Guillaume was the best. I couldn't have done it without him. And I'm so grateful that I have and had a partner who never tried nor argued on trying to understand me and understanding his emotions versus my emotions, my hormones, my trauma, my past, my mom. There were some really stupid things that I said that were just projections of anger and heartbreak, and he never once, you know, yelled back or argued back. he just stayed so strong on knowing that this was part of my process, and he knew that I would figure out how ridiculous those things are, and he knew that I was just so confused that projecting was part of my process, and he stayed so strong. Still to this day, he's so good on understanding why it's been so hard for me, and consistently just loving me so much no matter what, and making sure that I understand that love he has for me is endless and unconditional. So I'm extremely grateful for that. That this miscarriage surfaced was grief and loss and, you know, pain from my mom's death. It felt like I lost her again. Not only back from what I said about our reincarnation, you know, one, not having a mom to talk to. I was able to talk to my family, my closest inner circle friends, Guillaume, and my ex-boyfriend's mom, who I'm very close to. And I appreciate everyone's support. I think, though, there's nothing like talking to your mom about things. And I was really frustrated that she passed and wasn't able to inform me before, wasn't able to console me now, and, you know, isn't able to be there in the future. And I think that really, really unlocked and surfaced a lot of unresolved issues and trauma with my mom. And I think that's something I needed to work on, something I needed to heal. It's just unfortunate that the trigger to make me face a lot of things with my mom was going through this miscarriage that felt very hardcore. I had to really cope, and I had to really deal with, and I'm grateful that I was able to have the time to choose, to be able to choose myself, choose, you know, to go through this process. So it was, you know, month before my birthday pretty much, and then we were going to France in June for a month, where I was able to finally meet his daughter in person and have a child. And so I kind of was grateful that, you know, I had these life events to help me recognize how far I've come, and to continue moving and to continue healing. Through that, though, as much as I loved every single second, they're still all distractions in a sense, because I wasn't able to fully sit with myself. They healed so many parts of me, and my questioning on if I would be a good mother, if I am someone who can step into that role. And I think a lot of the physical insecurities that I had about being a mom was healed during that time. I got to trust Guillaume 10 times more. For a month pretty much after my miscarriage, I didn't want to be intimate or have sex at all. I was just so scared and traumatized, and my body and my sacral chakra were just done. And it healed a lot of my cheating trauma, actually, surprisingly. His reassurance and security he gave me during that time was something that really brought us closer, and this whole experience brought him and I so much closer in our friendship and our union, and I'm really grateful for that. I think that was the moment we both were able to know that we were going to be there for each other forever, and that our life together is going to be eventful, but we're together in it, and that was really beautiful. I fell back on music a lot. Music was my coping. These are the songs that I mostly listened to. I had like a miscarriage playlist that just allowed me to feel and cry and sing and release my emotions. And so music was, like always, music was always there for me. I wrote a few songs about it. I think one of the hardest things today, knowing that I probably won't have children, and I say that as a choice. Maybe just a month ago, I was having a really hard time because I was seeing so many babies that would have been the age of my child if I gave birth, and seeing that joy, seeing the parents' joy, that was really, really, really tough. I had a conversation with Guillaume that, I don't really want, kids, but how lucky are we that we already have one. And I'm committed to, having her be my daughter of choice, just like, my parents were to me, and I'm obsessed with her. I love her. Being an adoptee, I've seen how much a parent and someone can love someone else that isn't like blood related. And I think through my life, I've become very conscious on unconditional love and, the soul love instead of the human emotion love on, blood, and this came from me and this is my child because it's my DNA, this and this and this. I've seen the other side of it on choice. I think this miscarriage really allowed me to see and remind myself on my beliefs of family and love and children and partnerships and unions and friendships, and that's a big blessing. This day, this is the first time I'm really telling the story to anyone. I don't think I've told the story to anyone other than my family. I think it's important to understand and see that no matter what, the experiences and the situations are always going to be different, though the emotions of grief and loss and confusion is something that everyone experiences in their own way. It keeps you very distant on never comparing your story, never comparing or thinking how someone else feels or thinks or have experienced, but actually just more having compassion. My grief and my loss trauma is very different than most people, but it's this similar emotion. We just feel it differently because we're all different. And I think it's a privilege to be able to listen to different people's stories. I wouldn't say I'm completely healed from it, but I'm definitely still moving forward. A month ago, I was just walking on the streets of Vietnam, and there was this cart lady that had flowers, and I've never seen her before. And she was right by our apartment, and I went over and I, for some reason, just chose a flower. And as I was leaving, the police showed up and told her that she didn't have a license to be there or something around those lines, because I've never seen her again. It was just on that day when I needed something, and I bought this plant. I named her Sierra, and Guillaume was in China, and we were texting back and forth on this plant, and it was supposed to fully bloom in a month. And Guillaume loved the name Sierra, and he says something along the lines that if we ever have a baby girl, Sierra is a beautiful name. And I was able to snap into my consciousness and be like, this has to do with the miscarriage. And he responded like, yes, I think you really need to nurture something, and you need to birth something to heal, in this next year anniversary. You really need to nurture and water and grow and love something. And this beautiful plant showed up, and we named her, and that's been really healing. Just the nature of this plant and the intentions and the consciousness level of both Guillaume and I on the intention. And so that's been a really sweet healing thing that I did this first year, along with this vlog has been nice to be able to tell my story, which I think is just a big part of my life that I stopped doing a while ago, because I felt like my story, the more you talk about it, the more insane and unrealistic it sounds. And I think that put me in a space on ignoring that, oh shoot, that's actually me. But I'm grateful to be able to have a platform and have a brand that allows my storytelling to be projected. And I hope any women, anyone who has to go through this, just fully can understand that you don't need to have the answers all in one day. You just have to keep going to be able to figure out your own why and your own answers and your own meant to be, whether that means, you try again, or you come to peace with the lesson, or you adopt, or do whatever your timeline is meant for you to do. Just keep going to be able to get to that place where all the answers come down to you. That's what I hope. And I hope that you have a very loving partner who can love you through it all. I know for me that was one of the biggest differences on this process, is not having to do it alone. And that's my story. Thank you guys.